Okay, good morning, everybody. Shalom Aleichem. It's a personal honor to be here and to continue our focus, our celebration, our observance of Yom HaAzmaut this year in Yeshiva by having this really extraordinary opportunity to sit with two of our esteemed Rosh Yeshiva, to focus our minds and our hearts at a time where there is just so much that could be asked. I was shared earlier a list of, I think, over 60 questions that you submitted, or your Chaverim did, spanning a whole range of topics. And I think I say without exaggeration that if we would go through all of them, we would probably be here for days, not for less than an hour. But I think the exercise, the opportunity of formulating these questions and coming together is a tremendous zechus. Yesterday I had the opportunity to give a shiur in Teaneck, in Yana Dioma, and the shiur that I gave was based on a drasha that Rav Soloveitchik Schachter and Rav gave in 1958 on the 10th anniversary of the State of Israel. My father-in-law, Rabbi Yudin, mentioned last night with great excitement that he was listening at that moment to a shiur that was given by Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Schachter and Rav on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the State of Israel. And here we are celebrating the 77th anniversary. And the question that I'd like to begin with this morning was actually not on this list, but my question. And I will begin by presenting this question to Rav Schachter Shlita, and then of course Rabbi Willig will share any of his own comments if he has. But I'm wondering to what extent, if at all, this conversation that we are having, again, noting that there are 60 plus questions, have changed over the past 77 years. Are there any meaningful substantive changes in terms of the Metzius, demographics, political changes that mean that the way we approach these questions and the answers, be they personal questions or broader questions, communal questions, attitudes regarding Aliyah, thinking about where we are right now and where our futures are, is it just the same conversation year after year, or perhaps have things over the past 70 years and perhaps more recently, last 10 years, last 2 years, have they changed in the Rosh Yeshiva's opinion?
I think the situation, the situation in Eretz did change, and the shaylas are different, and the answers are often different. I remember when Rav Soloveitchik passed away, so Rav Soloveitchik's uncle, Rav Soloveitchik delivered a hesped. So part of the hesped was, they say that my uncle was anti-Zionist. And he said, I don't know if that's correct description, because Rav Soloveitchik had a daughter who was married to Rav Michal Feinstein, that was a nephew of Rav Moshe Feinstein, and they were living in America for a few years. And Rav was upset why they don't come back to Eretz Yisrael. So he called them on the telephone, and he said, I want you to move back to Eretz Yisrael within a year, and if you don't, I'll never talk to you for the rest of my life. So he said, I don't know if you can call such a person anti-Zionist. He threatens his children if they don't move back there, it's not going to talk to them. But how come they thought he was anti-Zionist? He said, because he visualized what's going to happen when Mashiach is going to come. They're going to have a Melech HaMashiach, a Tzaddik, and they're going to have a Kohen Gadol, going to have a Sanhedrin. And this is not what we see here now. On another occasion, he made a comment. When we'll see Shiva Sion is going to be what we were dreaming about all the generations. He says he wasn't dreaming about Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion was claimed to be an atheist. Probably not true. But he said he was an atheist. Probably not true. He's always quoting Tanakh. He was the one who founded the Chidon Tanakh. He was always quoting the Tanakh in the Knesset discussions, Lamaisa. So he said, this is not what I dreamt about. This is not what we were dreaming about. So his uncle was upset. But he says, my attitude is that the Torah has a way of forcing itself on the world. And even though right now, Eretz Yisrael that was a long time ago, Eretz Yisrael was very secular. It was anti-religion, not just secular, anti-religious. So he says, my attitude is that the Torah has a way of forcing itself on the world. He thinks that it will turn out like that. It has, in many areas, it has turned out like that. There's much more religion in the army. Just in the last 5 years, there's more religion in the army. We saw the changes. We were watching all this when this happened. And it's turning out. The secular Jews are moving away from Eretz Yisrael. And the religious Jews are more involved in the government, more involved in the army, and everything changed. All the shilas today are the different shilas, and the Jews are different because the whole situation changed. That's Bekitzer.
Just to add one little point, aside from the change that Rav Schachter Shalita mentioned, both within the army and other forums, just the sheer volume of religious Jews and of Talmidei Chachamim and of individuals who are labeled as Torasam U'Nasam has increased exponentially. It's well known that Ben Gurion, to whom Rashiv referred, is an atheist. Well, he was also a pragmatist, but he didn't have Koach HaNevuah. And when he gave her an exemption to 400 yeshiva boys studying Torah, that didn't have to go to the army, he figured that this is the last 400 men, it's all going to die out, and there'll be nobody left, there'll be no problem. And from those 400, now tens of thousands of individuals who are studying Torah, it's caused a little problem now. The shadows are different because it used to be, it's hard to touch this topic, but this is the day to talk about it. It used to be that the idea of Torah was very literal. There's a letter by Rav Shach, Schachter and Rav, where he was very worried that there'd be people who would take advantage of this draft exemption and they wouldn't really be Torah and Nasim. They wouldn't really be learning all the time. He had very harsh words to say about those people. He called them, this is his word, Rothwachs. In what sense? Because they would endanger the entire draft exemption by abusing it. This was Rav Shach. He was the leader of the Haredi Jewry in his day, well into the establishment of the state of Israel, but long before our time right now. Let's say, generally speaking, at the very end of the 20th century, say 30, 40 years ago. Today, there are individuals who say that there should be a total draft exemption for anyone who's Haredi. Doesn't have to be Torah and Nasim. And there's some cogency in their argument, because they're afraid that individuals who enter the army will lose their, forgive the expression, Harediyut, with a capital Ches, because there's certain markers of Haredi society which are not in sync with an army life. So that's a whole, what they're saying now is what Rav Shach, who was their iconic figure, would say is a rodef. Because in fact, they are endangering the whole draft exemption, as you well know now, in Eretz Yisrael. So I'm not here to take sides in this argument, Chas v'sholom. I think that I have no right to living in New York to take sides on arguments between various personalities in the Holy Land. But suffice it to say that there is a new effort to try to make the army more acceptable to what we call individual Haredi lifestyle. I have a grandson who was a member of that new Plugat Chashmonaim in Eretz Yisrael. I assume he's now in his base somewhere near somewhere Beit Sha'an. And he's a member of that cohort, the first group. And the truth is, I saw the films, sitting and learning the Beis Medrash. And on Shabbos, he's dressed like I'm dressed, in a suit and a tie and a white shirt. Because that's what they enable them to do. They went home for Pesach in the beginning. It's a new world in many, many ways, other than those that I've mentioned.
Of the questions that were submitted, I think it's fair to say that many of them focused either directly or indirectly on the question of Aliyah. And here again, it's not a new question. And clearly everyone who is here right now, I assume, certainly myself, the Rosh Hashiva, many of our Talmidim have not yet made Aliyah. On the one hand, it's a very personal and individual question. And if we would go around the room right now, I'm sure that everyone would appreciate the opportunity to have yechidos with each of the Rosh Yeshivas to discuss personal life planning. But are there klolim, are there general rules that we could consider, particularly for those of us who are torn between committing ourselves to a life of Klei Kodesh in the broadest sense here in Chutz La'aretz, be it in Rabbanis and Chinuch and Kiruv, in all of the different forms, or choosing to make a life in Israel, which may but may not allow quite as naturally and as comfortably for one to contribute within the realm of Klei Kodesh. How does, again, and just as a general approach, how does one balance those two very presumably important ideals?
I quote Rav Schachter Shalita, who quoted from Avraham Shapiro, Sechet Tzadik L'Bracha, the chief rabbi of Israel. When the Rosh Yeshiva met him, he said, "You have to come in Aliyah. How can you stay in America?" Then he started telling him what he does. And that was, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. Now he does so much more. And then Rabbi Shapiro told him, "You're not allowed to go in Aliyah. You can't abandon the ship. You're doing so many things in Eretz, in America which you cannot necessarily replicate in Eretz Yisrael." That was, did I quote it right? More or less. He'll fix it up. That's how I remembered it. And our Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik felt the same way, that we have particular positions here where we are able to influence others in a positive way, totally Yerushalayim, that we should not be abandoning our posts. I have a bit of a different, I'm a little more liberal. I tell my Talmidim who have such posts in America, if they can replicate them in Eretz Yisrael, that's great. I had one Talmud, I won't mention his name right now. He was both a Rebbe here and a Rav somewhere else in the community. And he wanted to go on Aliyah because he had a position to teach. I told him, "You can't go because he had doing two things. They all doing one." Comes to one day, "Rebbe, have a Rabbanis too." I said, "Go, Alu Atzlichu." And he has exact what? Been very successful in Eretz Yisrael. Fix it up.
Yeah, that's what Rav Soloveitchik used to say in public a lot, that anyone who's Zoisik in Rabbanis or in the Chinuch in Chutz La'aretz is not allowed to go on Aliyah because we are preventing assimilation and intermarriage. And he used that lashon that the captain of the ship is not allowed to leave until all the passengers are taken care of, and the general in the army is not allowed to leave until every soldier is taken care of. So I used to laugh in my heart. What kind of captain of the ship and general in the army, what kind of mishalim? So years later I found that expression in the tshuva in the Maram Shik. Maram Shik was a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer, and that's when the Reform movement began about that time, during the lifetime of Rebbe Kiveger and the Chassam Sofer. So one of the Chassam Sofer encouraged all of his Talmidim that they should only take a Rabbanis if they can establish a yeshiva in the same city. So all of his Talmidim had yeshivas. So the Ramshik had a Talmud who learned in his yeshiva. He was in the Rabbanis, and was always fighting reform. And he was successful, but he didn't enjoy it, always fighting reform. So he was offered a position in the late 1800s of Rabbanis and Eretz Yisrael. He can sit and learn and paskin shaylas and give shiur. That's mamash olam haba. So he packed up and he's ready to leave. So he sent a letter to his Rebbe. He should give him a bracha on the move. So Mamshik printed his letter in his chuvas. "I can't give you a bracha because I think you're doing shaloi kedid. That when you learned in my yeshiva, we had no right to draft you into the army to go into Rabbanis, and Rabbanis meant to fight reform. Many of you classmates went into business. They learned in yeshiva, then they went to business. You volunteered on your own to go to the rabbinate and to join the army, and you are a successful general." So that's when he has that line: the general is not allowed to leave until all the soldiers are taken care of, and the captain of the ship is not allowed to leave. That's the line in the Maram Shik that Rab Chaim Oizer quoted in his letter to Rav Kook. They knew each other. Rav Chaim Oizer and Rav Kook knew each other from Balozh and Yeshiva. They both went to Balozh at the same time. So Rav Kook was a Rav in Europe, and then he moved to Eretz. He was appointed chief, first a rabbi in Yafo, and then he was appointed chief rabbi of Eretz. So he wanted Rav Chaim Oizer to retire from the rabbinate. Rav Chaim Oizer was the head rabbi. There were many dayanim, many rabbanim. In Vilna, he was the head rabbi in Vilna. So he was thinking of retiring. He was an old man already. So Rav Kook was corresponding from Eretz Yisrael to Rav Chaim Oizer, who was in Vilna, that he should come. He has an apartment for him. He has a position for him. Rav Kook was the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, and Rav Chaim Oizer is going to be known as the Reish Kol B'nai Hagolah, chief rabbi of the world. And he had parnasa. He had money. Someone put up the money. He had the apartment, the money, and the title, everything. And Rav Chaim Oizer was prepared to go. And then the last minute, he sent Rav Kook a letter. He discussed it with the other rabbanim, the other dayanim in Vilna, and they said they won't be able to function that well without him. Rav Chaim Oizer was a super genius. He could do 5 different things at the same time. So he could talk on the telephone about a shayla, and answer a woman's shayla about a chicken, and give a smicha b'china, and write a tshuva all at the same time on 5 different topics. He was super genius. Rav Soloveitchik used to, when Rav Soloveitchik went to the University of Berlin in his 20s, so soon after, his parents moved to America. So he had nobody to talk to and learning. He learned everything from his father. Reb Chaim had already passed away at that time. So every so often, he would take the train from Berlin to go to Vilna. Sometimes he would go for Shabbos, and he would talk and learning with Reb Chaim Oizer. He wasn't the only one. All the yeshiva baruch who came to Vilna would talk and learning with Reb Chaim Oizer. The Poliship, with the Litviship, with the Galiciana, everyone. Chaim Oizer can talk to you and learning whatever style learning you are used to. So once Reb Chaim Oizer would pick up what style learning you like, he would carry on a conversation with you according to your style of learning. So Reb Chaim Oizer used to help out all the dayanim and everything, and not just in Vilna. Had to do with all of Lithuania, had to do with Russia, had to do with the Jews all over Europe. His Schachter and the Jews all over. So the dayanim told him that they won't be able to function well without him. So that's what he wrote a letter to Rav Kook. He backed out because the dayanim say it's not right. He has to stay where he is. So that's what the Marmshik sent a letter to this Talmud of his. There's a din in the Mishnah in Sukkah, Esek b'mitzvah patam and mitzvah. And he quotes the Ritva, and that Gemara in Sukkah says, patam and mitzvah, and yet usher. You're not allowed to be mafsik from the first mitzvah in order to do the second mitzvah. Because of being mafsik to do a dvar hashus, I'm in the middle of learning, then I'm going to be mafsik to go watch television. That's a dvar hashus. Maybe it's a dvar isa. So he said, you're Isaac in one mitzvah now fighting reform. You're not allowed to be mafsik. You're successful. You're successful. You're not allowed to be mafsik in order to take a position to learn and to pass kashaylas and to give shiur. So that's, but sometimes a person will go there so he can accomplish more. Some Rabban can accomplish more. Especially a lot of Americans go there so they have problems, unique problems that only face them, don't face the Israelis. So you need an American rabbi who can work that out. So some of the boys who went there so is extremely successful. So you have to figure out each case. Many of them will be successful.
Okay, one follow-up question about the topic of Aliyah before we talk about something else, and that is, I don't want to come across in any way whatsoever as being chutzpah, so I'm not going to repeat the initial question. I'm going to ask a different question, but I also want to reframe something asked originally. For those who are dating, and for them, they have decided that they would like to make Aliyah sooner than later. Is it appropriate to make that something that is ma'akev if they're considering certain shidduch prospects to say, this is very important to me? Or could it be that that attitude about Aliyah is, in that context, inflated? And just go back to the original question, for those of us who are not yet Rabbanim, for those of us who are not yet captains of any ship, but aspiring towards a meaningful future, is it okay for a person to say, I probably could be a successful captain here, but I'd rather be a passenger there? And if that was already answered, I'll go back to the recording and listen again.
A lot of young people think that their parents are not so smart, they're stupid, and they're smarter than their parents. Maybe that is true. A lot of times the parents have a different perspective on the world. The children sometimes are much more observant than the parents. But still, I belong to the Parents' Union. I belong to the Great-Grandparents' Union, but I belong to the Parents' Union. And even if the parents are not so smart, but they have years and years of life's experience. And when the children are dating, a lot of times they fall in love and they don't see something obvious. The shidduch is not just not going to work. It's ridiculous, just not going to work. They can tell right away it's not going to work. So it's true, many children have succeeded in making shidduchim completely without their parents' guidance. But it's much better if you do have your parents' guidance. And even if the parents are on a different page, religiously speaking, but they love, all the parents naturally love their children. They want their children to be successful. They want their children to have a happy life. And they can often tell, just they can smell whether this is a good shidduch or not, that makes sense. So if the children are going to move to Eretz, the parents are going to stay behind, then they're going to be on their own. That's going to be a problem. I don't think it's a smart idea when people are single. Forget about Eretz. I don't think it's a smart idea that people should restrict themselves. They're only going to go out with someone who's thinking about Aliyah, someone who plans to go on Aliyah. As it is, the pool of girls that you're going to marry, that you're going to date and marry, you're not going to marry a Satmar girl. No one here is going to marry a Satmar girl, probably not. There was a Satmar girl who went to start college. She was the one who sued the yeshiva. About the gay club. She was from a Satmar family. That's a problem. When students come from a high school that was very controlling, they didn't have any freedom at all. Then they come to IU. Everything is free. You can do whatever you want. They don't know how to deal with the freedom. They never experienced it before. Those students are often not successful. If you were brought up in high school, all the years you were brought up with a lot of freedom, so you know how to deal with the freedom. If you're brought up with a very restricted society, and then you come here, you don't know how to deal with it. That's a problem. So I don't think it's a smart idea. As it is, the pool of girls that you're going to date, that you're going to make possibly marry, is not so big. Then if you're going to limit it only to those who are considering moving to Eretz Yisrael, you're limiting yourself further. I don't think it's a good idea. I think you should have your parents help you get married, and then afterwards you see if it's reasonable to go to Eretz Yisrael.
Over the past generation, we have witnessed what appears to be a shift of sorts in attitudes and perspectives from the not, as my father-in-law would say, the not yet from community in Eretz Yisrael. And it has expressed itself in some very beautiful ways. For example, not limited to, but when it comes to music, there have been certain musical artists who have inspired, as far as we can tell, maybe hundreds of thousands of Jews to sing Shirei Kodesh and the like. And it's hard when you see that not to be inspired by it, and not to be, even for those of us who are Baruch Hashem B'nai Torah, and don't necessarily need that same outlook. We have heard a range of perspectives regarding this movement, whether it's good, whether it's not good, how we should relate to it, whether we should be part of it, whether we should stand on the side. How should we relate to this when we see these movements that really are, objectively speaking, very beautiful, because people perhaps who 20, 30 years ago would have not known how to say Shema Yisrael, and now they are standing online and paying money to be part of something that feels religious. There's a real spiritual vibe to it, but they're still not keeping Shabbos, and they don't have a Seder in learning. And where will this lead? Mi Yodeya. So how should we as B'nai Torah relate to this? Is it appropriate for us to be part of this in any way, to listen to this music? If so, are there any limits? I'm sorry if my question is very vague, but this is a question that I think many of us would appreciate some hadracha.
This is not a mitzvah tluya b'aretz. It's a wonderful question, but it's not necessarily limited to Eretz Yisrael. There are these stirrings in America as well. And I believe that whenever a person can accomplish something, in such a realm, it's a fantastic mitzvah opportunity. You know, the Chazal tell us, of Yahavtes Hashem Elokecha, Ahaveu al Habrios. If we love Hashem so much, we want that Hashem should be beloved by everybody, not limited to a small group, by everybody, all of Klal Yisrael. Really, all of humanity, according to some, Brios means everybody. So we should do whatever we can to see to it that more and more people will love Hashem. It's true that the optimum loving of Hashem is fulfilling all of His mitzvahs. No question about it. This doesn't mean that someone who comes closer to Hashem, closer to Torah, and closer to Am Yisrael is not a fulfillment of the mitzvah, at least in part. We heard before about intermarriage. So just getting someone to marry Jewish is a tremendous accomplishment. So therefore, I think that certainly in Eretz Yisrael, but even in Chutz La'aretz, a person has an opportunity to bring someone closer to Yiddishkeit. It certainly should be done. Many years ago, Moshe Feinstein wrote a psak when they started something called JEP to try to reach out to Bali Tshuva. It was a fantastic psak. He said that the same way as a Gvir has to give 1/10 of his money for tzedakah, a Ben Yeshiva should give 1/10 of his time to try to be Mekar Rechokim. That's quite an interesting idea. So therefore, the opportunity to bring people closer to Yiddishkeit, I think, is a tremendous one. But you don't have to wait to go on Aliyah to do it. You can do it here too.
Years ago, I remember there were a significant number of Rabbanim who had the attitude that if you mekarev people and all they're going to do is sing these nigunim, they're not prepared to daven, not prepared to keep Shabbos. So you don't work with them. Because the din is, if a non-Jew wants to convert, chutz midover echad, then you don't accept them. You have to only work with the people who are prepared to accept everything. That's such an attitude. So the other Rabbanim said, what are you talking about? You're talking about non-Jews coming to convert. You're talking about grandchildren of Rashi and Taisus. They lived in Russia for so many years. They were forced into giving up all religion. They were forced into becoming atheists. Have Rahmanas on them. They are Jewish. I'm not talking about accepting them to be Megaida. You can't be Megaida person if it's Chutz Midover Echad. We're talking about people with they have bigger yichus than I have. People, grandchildren of Rabbi Yitzchak Hana, grandchildren of Rishonim and Tzadikim and Achroinim. You have to be Megaida of everyone. You're Megaida L'Chad Soy, and so you're Megaida L'Chad Soy. They say that the Chavetz Chaim on his deathbed said, saw the Baruch HaKodesh, he died in the middle of the 1930s. So he says there's going to be a terrible Holocaust, and many people are going to lose their lives. It's going to be terrible. So they asked him, the Talmidim who were there, so they asked him, what should we do? So he said, there's a pasuk in Navi, it's a 1.5 Torahs, Partzion Tia Plata, that's all it will be. In Eretz Yisrael. So they asked him, in Eretz Yisrael, at that time, they only had inter-religious people. How was that going to be the Hatzavah? So he said the next two words in the pasuk are V'hoya Kodesh. So I think they say that Rav Kahanaman, the one who founded the Panovich Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, was one of the Talmidim who was there. So when they built the Panovich Yeshiva, that pasuk is on the wall on the outside. Whenever they show you a photograph from the yeshiva, has that pasuk Artzion Tia Plata V'hoya Kodesh. Like Rav Soloveitchik said, the Torah has a way of forcing itself on the world. So that's what's happening now in Eretz. In Kiruv, you can't start, when you want to be Mekar, you don't start with Taras HaMishpach, you don't start with the most difficult mitzvah to observe. You start from the Zuzah, you start from easy things. In education, you always go Menakal ala Kodeh. In this war that's still going on, there were people who are absolute atheists who went into the war. And then they saw Nisim in front of their eyes that convinced them that there is a God in the world. And they saw, and they tell some of these stories unbelievable. They tell the story I think there were 3 Jewish women who were captive, 3 hostages together. So one of the Arabs, one of the Hamas, had a conversation with them. He asked them, you know, God gave the Jewish people the 10 Commandments. Do you know what they are? So the 3 women together could only figure out 5 of the 10. They didn't know all 10. So the Arab said, that's why you're being punished now, because you don't know the 10 Commandments. So when one of the women, realized that Shabbos is one of the 10 Commandments, she pledged to herself she's going to stop observing Shabbos. And she was engaged to marry a different fellow who was still captive at that time. And then she made up her mind, she's observing Shabbos now for a couple of months. And if the boyfriend is not going to be observant, he was an atheist. His parents lived under the Russians during the communist period. Communism ended already at the end of the 1900s. But his parents were brought out absolute atheists. So she had made up her mind, if her boyfriend is not going to be observant, she can't marry him. So when he was released, he was telling about all the nisim that he saw. Every step of the way was an S that saved him from the next star, the days of the next star. And he's in the process of becoming religious. So it's interesting, they say they took him to the Schachter and Rav, and they said all the Jews come to daven here. And he asked the rabbi who took him, what do you have a right to do? What can you daven about? Whatever you want to daven about. So the first thing that he davened, what language? Whatever language he wanted. First thing he davened, God should forgive his father that he was such an atheist. He was killed on October 7th. He didn't have a chance to become a Chayzer B'tshuva. He thanks to Rebbeinu Shalom that he saw Nisim, he showed him Nisim in captivity. He became a mammon in captivity. Many, many stories like that. That's the way it's going. The Rebbeinu Shalom is going to see to it. Whether we like it or not, whether we want to or not, they're going to see to it. They're all going to be, they're not interested. Those people are going to move to Chutz La'aretz. And all of us who are interested in the religion, we're going to be moving to Eretz Yisrael. Sooner or later. Should be sooner.
Amen. So just to pick up on the Rosh Hashiva's story, which is one of thousands, it captures a measure of Mesiras Nefesh that we have seen repeatedly over the past couple of years. Granted, we've seen it for decades, but I think we've all seen it close up in the most extraordinary way over the past couple of years. And I can't speak for anybody else, I sometimes feel envious. I don't know how, in my current state of circumstances, to be able to achieve, to be able to access, to be able to demonstrate Mesiras Nefesh in a way that even comes close to what sometimes the average 19-year-old who is drafted is zocheh to commit to. And as long as we are here, and as long as we are doing our shlichus here in Chutz La'aretz, how can we experience, how can we achieve, how can we live lives of Mesiras Nefesh, even if we don't necessarily have the opportunities that are sometimes not even opportunities of choice, but imposed upon Achenu B'nai Eretz Yisrael? How can we achieve that here in Chutz La'aretz? Mesiras Nefesh.
The Rebbe Rabban Soloveitchik would quote the Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei Torah. He talks about the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. The whole parak is about someone who has to give up his life in difficult circumstances. That's how the Rambam starts. The Rambam says, any other Averik Safed, 3 cardinal sins, a person has to do the Averik and save his life. And the Rebbe Rabban said at the time that people think that Kiddush Hashem, Mesiras Nefesh, is only in a moment when your life is threatened. You have to be willing to give up your life to serve the Kadosh Baruch. He interpreted the Rambam to say that that's not the case. A person can achieve Mesiras Nefesh and Kiddush Hashem by living a life of Torah, by living a life when you sacrifice whatever it happens to be to the Kadosh Baruch. It's not just an army. There are many other ways to exhibit sacrifice. Some people here have different actions that tempt them, whatever they may happen to be. And they decide they're going to control themselves. They're not going to do action X. which the Torah either prohibits explicitly or discourages, and they're not going to do that. That's also Mesiras Nefesh. You heard before about Kiruv L'Machzah. It's also Mesiras Nefesh L'Machzah, or to paraphrase with expression which totally in a similar vein, Malikot L'Chul, Malikot L'Malka. A person is Mesiras Nefesh in part. He's not going to partake in something which really beckons him, and he desires, and he wants. So you say, what's the source for Kiddush Hashem, literally? V'chol nafshecha. Afilu noteles nafshecha. It doesn't have to be so high. It's part of nafshecha, any part of you that wants to do something and you restrain yourself, you refrain from doing it out of Ahavas Hashem, that's also Mesiras Nefesh. The pratim are too many to discuss in the amount of time that we have today.
Well, one of the most painful realities of the past couple of years is having to see the disunity and the fighting machlokas that has taken place within Eretz Yisrael and has echoed throughout Klal Yisrael regarding attitudes towards Bnei Yeshiva fighting in the army, and that was touched upon already. For many of us, and maybe for all of us, we struggle when it comes to certain questions in which it seems, and maybe we're oversimplifying it, that even in the most expansive understanding of Elu v'Elu Divlukim Chaim, there doesn't seem to be a place in our hearts or our heads to incorporate all of those views, which sometimes puts us in a situation where we feel the need, even if we're not going to utter these words, even in our hearts, to form a judgment against someone who is an extraordinary Torah scholar, somebody who may be identified by many in Klal Yisrael as being a quote-unquote Gedolim Yisrael, whatever that means. And it puts us, especially in our yeshiva, where we pride ourselves, as we should, on having a more open understanding, a more tolerant attitude towards those to our left and those to our right. It has forced us sometimes to really struggle. And any hadracha, any insight from the Rosh Yeshivas to how do we make sense, how do we understand, how do we process, how do we relate to extraordinary individuals who say things that seem indefensible.
People don't like what I say. I haven't met so many Gedolim. I learned by Rav Soloveitchik. He was a super Gedolim. In comparison to him, there aren't so many other Gedolim around. People say opinion against often the Gemaras. What are you talking about? So I'm not so spoiled when I hear a big Rosh Yeshiva somewhere. He knows how to say a shtickle Torah on this line. What about the other Gemara? He never learned the other Gemaras. He doesn't know all of Kol HaTorah Kula. Unfortunately, that's my attitude all the time. I haven't seen somebody that say, it doesn't shake me up.
In other words, before Willig, in other words, with Schachter, that when we hear statements that seem truly indefensible, we could just comfortably come to the conclusion that, doesn't know what he's talking about. Should we check with somebody before coming to such a conclusion?
Check with me.
Okay.
Just that there was a big Maimon, a big Rosh Yeshiva, spoke in Lakewood, and there were many people listening that you shouldn't join the World Zionist Organization. And then after this big Maimon, they printed on the internet that the whole thing was set up by the conservative movement. They didn't want the Orthodox to get money. They have millions of dollars or billions of dollars. The World Zionist Organization has a fortune of money to divide. And for so many years, only the Reform and the Conservative got the money. And now that the Orthodox joined the World Zionist Organization, so they get money for yeshivas, for mikvahs, for kiruv, for all the holy topics. So the Reform don't want the Orthodox to get any money. So they had people write up these posters. If you walk through Hershel, they always have posters hanging on the wall about this Chil Hashem, that's Chil Hashem. They had people put up posters of Bnei Brak And in their short and all the from the neighborhoods written like from a real author that you're not allowed to join the World Zionist Organization. You're not allowed to join it. So the Reform and the Conservative will have more money to attack the Orthodox. And everybody fell for that. So they thought that these were the Gedolim. They weren't the Gedolim, they were the conservatives. So they wrote up the whole skin in the yeshiva world. Not in the spell, shouldn't be in the spell.
You understand very well that Mordechai of Schachter is one of the Gedolim. That's for sure. So he's rightfully not the spell from these people. I'm a very small person. I am the spell. What can I do? I don't view myself in anywhere in their league. And so therefore I'm stuck in a different position. What do you do if you can't just dismiss these people and say they don't know what they're talking about? I don't have that in me. So I have a different problem. And I have to have a different solution. But the Rosh Hashiva she doesn't need. But I think many of you might need. And that's as follows. There have always been Chilukei days on these significant matters. Just to start with the one that Rosh Hashiva Shlita mentioned about the World Zionist Organization. It's an old dispute. It goes back 100 years. And it was originally a dispute whether there should be a state of Israel or should not be a state of Israel. Once the state was established, so one of the great Aguda leaders, Willig, not unrelated to what he was just talking about, said, Konas Adam, the state is established already. Stop fighting about the state. It exists. You have to deal with it. And so with the exception of Samra, which is a different kehillah, they've separated themselves completely. They don't take money from the government. But the vast majority of, we'll call them Shomei Mitzvahs, call them Charedim if you want, have found a way to coexist with the Israeli government. When I was growing up, we'll call them Charedim, were a teeny fraction of the Knesset. Teeny, 2 seats, 3 seats, maximum 4 seats out of 120. Are you aware of the fact that today, the majority of what we call the Memshalah, the coalition, is Shomer Shabbos? That's what I was told by reliable sources from different parties. Talk about a change, it's an incredible change. But what's with the World Zionist Organization? So there's, to this day, the purists maintain you have no right to join this organization, which is an organization of individuals who in their mind are kofrim. And certainly that was a position which was taken by Gedolim Yisrael, not unanimously, but certainly a significant number, way back when. So you ask, but what about the money from the state of Israel? God's forced upon us. You know, citizens who live in Israel are forced upon us. But to voluntarily join the World Zionist Organization is an kfira. It's your heart. Doesn't matter that you're going to give all the money to the reform. It's irrelevant. Can't do it. This is the position which has been espoused. I don't agree with it whatsoever. I'll explain to you where it comes from. Similar disagreements have happened with respect to the service in the army. Certain statements which were made are very painful. Very painful. Comparisons with other types of civil servants. I'm not even going to mention the actual comparison because this is too painful to even mention here. Which I think are completely wrong. And in the extreme formulations, I find them indefensible. However, the position that I mentioned earlier, to which I do not agree at all, that they, you know, when I was in Kerem, so Rav Goldberg, who founded the Hesder, would talk about the yeshiva, as others have, as a Tevis Noach, that with all that's going on in the world outside, I'm talking now about 57 years ago, something like that, a long time ago. You have to stay in the yeshiva not just to learn Torah, If you stay in the yeshiva to prevent yourself from being swamped by the outside secular influences. So there are those who have taken that to the extreme and say, okay, therefore you can't go to the army. No one can go to the army. So I don't agree, but I can understand when someone says that. And I believe, that's my belief, we have to respect Talmidei Chachamim, even if they don't know Kol Torah Kula. The Talmidei Chachamim who have Yiras Shamayim, whose views diverge dramatically from our own views. Dramatically. I don't feel it's my role to attack them in any which way. We try to disagree agreeably. Say, it's not my Masorah. I also was privileged to learn Rav Soloveitchik, Schachter and Rav. And his Torah and his way of thinking had a tremendous influence on me and on so many others in this room, either directly or indirectly. But my Rebbe never said that he has a monopoly. There were many other Rabbanim, his contemporaries, whom he respected, didn't agree with him. When he would be at a wedding, he wouldn't be Masada Kedushin in the presence. That happened at the Rothwachs. Rabbi Moshe was Masada Kedushin, even though the Rav was there. I've been in such weddings with Yaakov Kamenetsky and others. He had respect for, of course, Rabbi Schachter, and those are real Gedolim. Today we don't have people like that. That I'll agree with. But what can we do? Yiftach b'dara k'shmul b'dara. Paras lefi hadar. Apparently, if the level of Gedolim has gone down, it's our fault, because the Torah has gone down. There's a concept of Yeridas Hadoros. But in every generation, Kadosh Baruch Hu has promised there are going to be individuals who will be Talmidei Chachamim. And just as with disagreements, strong disagreements between our Rebbe and his contemporaries, and yet they respected one another, we saw it with our own eyes. So too, I think we have to try to follow and respect individuals, even if we disagree sharply with the positions that they take on these and other issues.
Thank you. One final question, because we're out of time, and I know that I speak on behalf of everyone here. We appreciate the Rosh Hashiva sitting with us today, and I think I asked about 2 out of the 60 plus questions. We'll come back. We have to come up with another format opportunity to come back. But today is not Hey Eor, as we know this coming Shabbos is, and wondering if either one or both of the Rosh Hashiva could just give us hadracha personally, and to those of us who are in a position where we may be in positions of influence within our various ships, so to speak. What, if anything, should we be doing differently this Shabbos? Should we be omitting any parts of davening that we would, that correspond to Tachmanan? Should how we recite it? Yes or no? Does it depend? Should individuals consider doing that if the shul is not doing it? Halacha l'maisa. What should we do this Shabbos?
About what?
On Hey Eor, should we make any changes to the davening this coming Shabbos?
You say it. I'll say my piece.
Willig was the scholar Rabban in Willig for many years. Nearly appointed by Chaim Weiser to be the head of all Rabban, who was given in Hershel and Willig. It was his first comment on Megillah, written in the back of the Noam Shas. He was the Magiyah on the Noam Shas. His grandson was the teacher of Yeshiva, Rabbi Markelis. And the grandson said that the family tradition has it that Shlomo Leluli is going to give the Shas from memory. They printed the galley, and he just read the Gemara Rashi Tyson. He knew what it was supposed to say. And it said everything correct, and he left it like that. He didn't have to look at another Gemara. He knew every word in the Gemara Rashi Tyson by heart. That's how he's Magiyah. That's an ayah. That's why there are some misprints that don't the Shas that don't appear in any other edition. Mistakes that only a Litvak will make. Had a shin instead of a samach instead of a shin, because they mispronounced the shins and the samach. Beish Medes, so they say Beish Medrash, they say Beish Medes. So this, Reb Shalom Adon has a comment on the opening Mishnah in Megillah. Why did the Chachamim institute different days for Kriyas on Megillah? These people read on Yudala, they read on Tezvav, and then Yom HaKnisa, you learned earlier. So he says, on a Din Deraisa, there's a pasuk, Ishpatecha Yolachem. All the people follow the same thing. So the Chachamim wanted to institute a Yontiv, and the Rabbanon, you should know what's the Yontiv. It's not a Yontiv Deraisa. So the Dafka, they had different people in different cities observe it on different days. I don't see what's so bad. If in Eretz Yisrael, when there's a concern of Chilul Shabbos, there's all the Chilonim are going to participate in the celebrations of Yom HaAzmaut. So there's going to be an awful lot of Chilul Shabbos. In the original signing of the Declaration of the Medina, the whole thing was illegal because the British had the mandate until Friday night, midnight, and some of the people who signed the Declaration of the Medina were Shomer Shabbos. So they declared, they signed the Declaration of the Medina, and year, it wasn't really illegal till Vadaya, till Friday night, midnight, when the mandate was up. So the original Yom HaAzmaut was really supposed to be on Vav, but they moved it because of Chilul Shabbos. So that's wonderful when Eretz, the Rabbanut and stuff. But we don't have such celebrations. We don't have people who are not going to be Machal Shabbos because we're going to say Halal and Shul. So that's why I think Rabbi Baron Soloveitchik, they say, thought like that. We in Chutz La'aretz, we should observe Yom HaAzmaut on He'ir. We don't have any concern. I don't think it's a violation of the Achdus of Klal Yisrael. That's why they made the Taklan Purim, different days with different people, to show that it's not a din derabaisa, not a din deraisa, because it's not Mishpatecha Yelach. I don't see what's so terrible. We really ought to say, we say Avarachmin on Shabbos because of the killers that were killed centuries ago. But here, there, soldiers were killed this week. Soldiers were wounded this week. People, we're losing lives now. We should say Tzid Kosra. We should really say Tzid Kosra. This Shabbos, Tzid Kosra is at Tziddik Adim because Moshe Rabbeinu died on Shabbos. But there are Jews dying in the army on Shabbos every week. Terrible. I would think that we're in the middle of Kolzman, in the middle of the war. Maybe we should say Avar Rachman every Shabbos. You say Tzid Kosra every Shabbos. Maybe we should never leave it up. I think we should say Halal on Shabbos. Even those who said Halal today. Say Halal on Shabbos also. What's so bad? Not a contradiction.
So this is, I'm the last word here, so I'll just tell you from a practical perspective, it's a little bit of ironic. This Shabbos in my shul is the Shabbos Sheva Brachos for someone who's named Aaron Soloveitchik. And I know, I heard from Rabbi Baron exactly what Schachter Shita said, that he observed it on Shabbos no matter what. What can I do? I'm a young Israel rabbi, and in the shul that I lead, we do say Halal after davening is over. We say full Halal, and others say only half Halal. This is a video which existed before I got to the shul. The difference was they said Halal in its original slot, which not only was my Rebbe opposed to, but also goes Machalakas, who would walk out in the middle, so which was So the first thing I did, I moved it to the end, and I added Yom Yerushalayim, which that's for a different topic, and I followed the Rabbanut more or less, which means that in our shul, we said Halal this morning. Actually, I was about Tefillah because the regular person is in Oval, in Yom Chodesh, he didn't feel he wanted to say Halal, so I said the Halal. After davening was over, full Halal. Yesterday we didn't say Tachton and Mincha, and today we also won't say Tachton and Mincha. We didn't say Tachton this morning. But because I'm following the Rabbanut, I feel that Balabatim will not appreciate the godless of our Rosh Hashiva. And you can't have it more than once. So in our shul, notwithstanding the presence of the young Aaron Soloveitchik as a chosim, we're going to daven a regular. But of course, except for the omission of Halal, it corresponds to what Schachter Shita said. We will say Avarachmin, we'll say Tzid Kosra, because from my perspective, we moved the whole Yom HaAzmaut lock, stock, and barrel from Shabbos to Thursday. Now, it can only come out 4 days of the week, like most things. It can come out on Shabbos, it can come out on Friday, where they also, as it did in its original form, it was on Friday, and then we moved back to Thursday because the word Chilul Shabbos. It can also come out on Wednesday, when we keep it on Wednesday. You gotta love where I will at least partly follow the Rebbe. I should follow all along, but what can I do? I'm a shul rabbi, I can't help it. And that is they introduced something new in the fairly recent past. The first decades, how many I can't tell you, the 7+ decades, when Yom HaAzmaut came out on Monday, so they celebrated on Monday. Why not? Monday. More recent years, there was a concern, and a legitimate concern in Eretz Yisrael. The day before, it was called Yom HaZikaron, which became a very big deal. And if it would be on Sunday, there'd be Chalila V'chas Chilul Shabbos and Motzei Shabbos. So there they moved from Monday to Tuesday. So that I don't accept. That's too much for me. That's totally unrelated to our world here in Eretz Yisrael, in America. We don't have any of that stuff. But, as I say, that's one of my more popular psukim on the Young Israel Riverdale. Because the way it is now, whenever we don't say Tachna on Yom HaAzmaut, except for Wednesday, we always submit a long Tachna, either on Monday or Thursday. Hope the foolish name will be here and made it up.
Good.
Thank you. Late, supposed to be at 2:50.
Very good.
Can I take this?
Yeah.
Yeah.